My husband married a wealthy widow in Connecticut while we were still legally married. He told everyone I was an old chapter, nothing but a mistake he'd corrected. What he didn't know was that I had already met his new bride not as his ex-wife, but as her estate consultant. And when she died, just 6 months into their marriage, guess who had the only signed copy of her will? Don't rush to judge. Let the full story unfold, then tell me how it made you feel. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because some betrayals don't end in heartbreak. They end in court. For nearly 2 decades, Miranda Donovan believed she had built a real partnership. She met Derek Whitmore when she was 27, fresh out of grad school, and he was already climbing the ranks at a boutique wealth management firm in Boston. He was sharp, charming, 5 years older, and spoke of their future like it was already a secured investment. They married within the year. At first it was teamwork. Miranda handled logistics, finances, and eventually gave up a promotion to relocate for Derek's job. She supported him through every pivot, every late-night pitch, every urgent weekend that stole time from birthdays and anniversaries. When he left corporate to start his own consulting firm, she helped draft the business plan, structured the tax setup, and handled the books. But as the firm grew, her name faded. Clients never knew Miranda existed. She was the wife always spoken of vaguely, if at all. Still, she stayed. They didn't have children by choice, Derek said. He didn't want anything tying them down until the business was secure. Miranda quietly grieved that choice more than she admitted, but by then she was used to sacrificing without acknowledgement. Then came the shift. Derek turned 50, and something changed. His wardrobe updated, his gym hours doubled. He hired a young assistant named Casey and stopped bringing work home. Miranda began to notice the small omissions: dinner plans, forgotten strange charges on the joint credit card calls taken in another room. She didn't panic. She documented. One afternoon, while Derek was away on a supposed client retreat in San Diego, Miranda received an email receipt for a luxury suite booked for 2 champagne included. The confirmation was forwarded from Derek's personal Gmail, accidentally CC'd to their shared email alias. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, she opened a folder on her desktop she hadn't used in years. Whitmore Backup, and began collecting. Receipts, financial statements, screenshots. She was calm, focused. No accusations, no screaming. Just data. A week later, Derek came home with a barely concealed tan and told her he'd be traveling more in the coming months. New clients, he said. Miranda smiled and asked if he wanted chicken or salmon for dinner. The following month, she noticed Derek began locking his home office door. He also started taking longer, quieter calls. His calendar entries became vague off-site private consult executive session. Then, on a Thursday evening, as Miranda was reviewing their household accounts, she found a $25,000 wire transfer from their joint savings account to a private holding company based in Delaware. The recipient name LH Heritage Trust. Miranda didn't recognize the entity, but the initials lingered in her mind like a bad aftertaste. 3 days later, Derek told her he needed space. No explanation, no fight, just space. He moved into a rental loft in downtown Hartford. Miranda stayed in their house, the one she'd managed, renovated, and refinanced twice to keep the business afloat during its early years. At first, she thought it was a midlife crisis, but then she discovered the engagement announcement. It wasn't sent to her. Of course, it appeared on the website of a luxury wedding venue in Greenwich. The names were unmistakable. Derek Whitmore and Lenore Holloway. Private ceremony, estate grounds. March 12th. Lenore Holloway. Miranda stared at the screen, her tea going cold. The name was familiar, whispered in charity circles, listed in donor rosters, occasionally featured in financial headlines. A recent widow. Heiress to the Holloway construction legacy. No children, no close family. And now, marrying Miranda's husband. Except there was one problem. Miranda and Derek were still legally married. He had never filed. And that changed everything. Miranda didn't react the way most might. She didn't scream. She didn't call. She didn't beg for an explanation. She emailed her attorney. Derek hadn't filed for divorce. There were no legal proceedings, no separation documents, only a vague departure, and now an illegal engagement. Miranda's attorney confirmed it. Any marriage Derek entered into would be considered void unless he obtained a divorce decree first. And yet he was moving forward as if Miranda didn't exist. She let him. Instead, she updated her resume. 2 weeks later, Miranda took on a new client through a boutique estate services agency she had freelanced with before a short-term project handling charitable allocations and asset transitions for a wealthy widow preparing a revised will. The name on the client file hit her like a freight train, Lenore Holloway. At first, she thought it was a mistake. But the address, the family foundation, even the trust name LH Heritage Trust confirmed it. Miranda didn't decline. She showed up to the estate's side office precisely at 9:00 a.m. the next Monday, dressed in neutral tones, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. Lenore was cordial, sharp, and surprisingly warm. 66 years old, impeccably styled with a dry wit and a soft New England drawl, she seemed unaware that the man who now dined at her table was legally married to the woman standing across from her. "I just want things simple," Lenore said during their first meeting. "My late husband left me more than I need, and I don't trust lawyers to keep things human. I want someone real to help organize what matters before I make it official with Derek." She smiled softly, her fingers tapping on a folder titled Prenuptial Considerations. Miranda didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "Then let's make it simple." Over the next 4 weeks, Miranda worked closely with Lenore, sorting through donation ledgers, structuring soft beneficiary pathways, and even revising her testamentary instructions. Miranda never let emotion touch the surface. She compartmentalized, focused, listened. Lenore confided more than she probably should have, about how she felt alive again, about how Derek made her feel young, needed, adored, about how the world seemed to look at her differently now, no longer just the widow with real estate and stock portfolios. "He doesn't ask for anything," Lenore said one afternoon, pouring tea. "He makes me feel like I'm the only one who matters." Can you believe that? Miranda wanted to ask if he made Casey feel that way too, but she just smiled. He's very persuasive. As they approached the final stages of Lenore's updated will, Miranda made a quiet suggestion. "Sometimes it's smart to keep a physical copy signed, sealed, and stored where you choose. I've seen estates get torn apart because someone assumed the digital copy was enough." Lenore agreed. Together they finalized the document. Lenore signed it in front of a notary from Miranda's agency, sealed it in an envelope, and handed it to Miranda. "I trust you," Lenore said. "You're one of the few who don't look at me like a balance sheet." Miranda placed the envelope in her briefcase. She didn't say what she was thinking. "I'm not just holding your will. I'm protecting it from the man you think loves you." A week later, Miranda resigned from the project, citing a family emergency. Lenore was disappointed, but gracious. "I hope Derek treats you to something wonderful soon," she said in parting. Miranda replied, "I hope he gives you everything he promised." It was the closest she'd come to speaking the truth. She walked away with no drama, no hint of what she'd uncovered, no indication that she knew Lenore's fiancé better than anyone else in the room. And when Miranda got home, she placed the sealed will in a secure lockbox at her bank. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was insurance. Because Miranda knew something Derek didn't. Lenore had rewritten everything, and Miranda's name was in the fine print. As executor, Lenore Holloway was pronounced dead on a rainy Tuesday morning. The cause of death, heart failure in her sleep. The location, her bedroom suite inside the Holloway estate. The timing, 3.5 months after her private ceremony with Derek Whitmore. The will, as filed with the family's longtime legal firm, was dated over a year old. Predictable clean. Most assets set to transfer to various charities and business interests Derek had helped her review. But that was not the most recent will. That one sat in a climate-controlled safe deposit box in a private bank under Miranda Donovan's name. And in that version, dated, notarized, and sealed, Derek Whitmore wasn't just absent from the beneficiaries list. He was listed under a special clause. No claim to be honored from any individual who was legally married to another at the time of involvement or intent of marital contract. Miranda didn't cry when she saw the headline. She didn't reach out to Derek. She simply opened the vault and stared at the envelope for a long, silent minute. Lenore had died believing she was loved. That was the true tragedy. The media picked up the story quickly. Real estate heiress dies suddenly, months after private marriage. The family foundation released a statement, brief and diplomatic. Derek appeared in a sharp black suit, sunglasses, and just the right amount of visible grief. He held a brief press conference, stumbling through a few words about losing the light of his life. Miranda watched it on mute, focusing on his body language. She could tell he wasn't shaken. He looked poised, calculated, and perhaps in his mind he had won. Within days, Derek moved to initiate control over several accounts tied to Lenore's holdings. He contacted her foundation's board to discuss restructuring. He reached out to the estate attorney for access to the house. But that's where things began to shift. Because the estate attorney, Frances Adler, the woman Miranda had spoken to briefly while reviewing tax documents with Lenore, had questions. And one of them came in the form of a phone call to Miranda herself. "I found your name listed as executor in a sealed version of Lenore's will." Frances said, her tone carefully neutral. "It doesn't match the one filed. I need to understand the timeline." Miranda didn't dodge. She confirmed her involvement. She sent a notarized timestamp, the name of the notary, and the storage documentation. She even offered to appear in person if needed. 3 hours later, Frances called again. "This changes everything." Derek was furious. Not publicly, not yet. But the boardroom doors began closing. Calls were no longer returned. A quiet hold was placed on the accounts he had already tried to access. Miranda could feel the shift in the air. Then 2 days later, she received a call from Celeste Hastings, Lenore's estranged niece, a corporate attorney in Manhattan, who had long been cut out of the public estate conversations. "I know who you are," Celeste said, "and I think I know what he did." Miranda didn't speak. "I'm not after the money," Celeste added. "But I want answers. And if he had anything to do with my aunt's death, I want him to rot." That night, Miranda pulled out the handwritten notes Lenore had made, little scribbles in the margins of spreadsheets. Names she circled, questions she'd never asked out loud. Miranda hadn't known what to make of them before. Now she did. Lenore had doubts, maybe not about love, but about timing. About Derek's intentions. About how fast everything was moving. Miranda remembered one line she'd jotted in a moment of shared laughter. "Hope I'm not rewriting my legacy for a man who likes watches more than soulmates." Miranda had kept that slip of paper. It was folded between pages of trust documents, quietly filed, never shared. Now it might become a nail. As the investigation began, discreetly, quietly, but very real, Miranda did something she hadn't done in over a year. She called Derek. He didn't answer. So she sent one line via email. "I suggest you retain counsel. The will you never read is already in motion." No greeting, no signature. And this time it was Miranda who disappeared from view. Derek Whitmore always believed in control. He believed in perception, in timing, in moving first. He prided himself on being the man who never reacted, only calculated, manipulated, advanced. But now the walls were shifting. 2 weeks after Lenore's death, he found himself locked out of her financial accounts. He called the foundation's director, no answer. He emailed Frances Adler's office. They responded with a formal statement. "The estate is under independent legal review. Further communication must be routed through your counsel." Derek stared at the email like it was a glitch. Then he made the mistake of assuming it was just a technical issue. He contacted a new attorney, one outside of Connecticut, and demanded immediate probate access. But within 48 hours, he received a formal objection filing submitted by Miranda Donovan, listing herself as legal executor of the most recent will. Attached were documents notarized and time-stamped validating her position. His lawyer went pale. "You were still married when you entered that second marriage," she said, flipping through case law. "If that's proven, it's not just inheritance fraud. You're looking at criminal exposure." Derek snapped. "I didn't marry Lenore for her damn money." The lawyer arched an eyebrow. Then why were you transferring assets from her trust 2 weeks after the wedding? Silence. Behind closed doors, Derek scrambled. He called contacts, leveraged favors, tried to push through backdoor influence at banks, but found stone walls at every turn. Miranda had submitted alerts to all institutions connected to Lenore's estate, alerting them to potential fraudulent claims. Meanwhile, the media began sniffing again. Not tabloids, but business outlets. They'd noticed Derek's name disappearing from board statements. His speaking engagements postponed rumors of internal audits at Holloway Construction. A headline emerged. From power couple to probate war, who really inherited Lenore Holloway's legacy? Derek didn't speak publicly. He didn't dare. But behind the scenes, his fury boiled. He sent Miranda a letter, not legal, not formal, just handwritten. You're playing a dangerous game. We both know what's at stake. I'll give you one chance to walk away. Miranda never responded. Instead, she met with Francis Adler. They reviewed the sealed will, revalidated every timestamp, and Francis filed a motion to enforce. Derek would be formally removed from any claim to Lenore's holdings. Worse, the IRS was now alerted to inconsistencies in his post-marriage financial activity. Then came the subpoena. Not for Miranda, for Derek. Celeste Hastings had quietly submitted documentation of suspicious withdrawals from Lenore's accounts shortly before her death transactions Derek had pushed for, while Lenore was too tired to review paperwork. Now there was talk of financial coercion, possibly undue influence, maybe more. Miranda didn't smile. Not once. Even when Francis told her that the probate court had ruled in favor of the newer will. Even when Derek's accounts were frozen. Even when the wedding itself was declared void under bigamy statutes. She simply returned to her townhouse, made herself a cup of tea, and opened the drawer where Lenore's last handwritten note rested. It had been written on yellow stationery. Unsent. Unsealed. Just 6 lines in a hurried scrawl. He says I make him feel alive, but I'm starting to feel smaller in my own home. If I'm wrong, I'll look like a fool. But if I'm right, I'll be gone before I ever see the truth. Miranda folded the note and placed it back in the drawer. This wasn't about revenge. It was about a woman who was fooled and another woman who refused to be fooled twice. Derek Whitmore stood in court wearing a $2,000 tailored suit that no longer fit the room. His lawyer sat stiffly beside him, jaw clenched. Across the aisle, Miranda Donovan sat poised, unreadable. She wasn't there for drama. She wasn't there for vengeance. She was there for validation and for closure. The judge's voice was steady as she read from the bench. Given the substantial evidence submitted, the court recognizes the most recent testamentary document of Lenore Holloway, dated and notarized 3 months prior to her death, naming Miranda Donovan as executor and excluding Mr. Whitmore from all estate claims. There was no gasp, no outburst, just Derek's shoulders slightly twitching. The courtroom was silent except for the tapping of a reporter's keyboard and the click of a single shutter. Derek's publicist hadn't shown. His investment clients had stopped calling days ago. Outside the courtroom, the world had already begun to forget him. The IRS had frozen his assets pending investigation into trust mismanagement. Celeste Hastings had filed a wrongful influence complaint. The state's ethics board had opened a quiet inquiry into the legitimacy of Derek's consulting firm. And Lenore's Family Foundation had released a single brutal press release. We deeply regret any personal associations that may have compromised the legacy of Lenore Hastings Holloway. Our duty now is to preserve her name with integrity. Derek tried one last move, an appeal filed quietly through a third-party attorney arguing Miranda had manipulated Lenore during her most vulnerable period. But the court dismissed it within days. Miranda had documentation of every meeting, recordings of every instruction Lenore had dictated. A digital paper trail, clean and complete. There was no room left to twist. Derek returned to his condo. The one he used to brag was minimalist. Now it was empty in a different way. Furniture had been repossessed. Legal fees mounted daily. And for the first time in his adult life, no one returned his calls. Even Casey, the assistant, who had once giggled through late-night strategy meetings, had updated her LinkedIn and relocated to Chicago. All that remained was silence. And one envelope, a letter, no stamp, slipped under his door late one afternoon. It was from Miranda. Not handwritten, not angry, just a single typed paragraph on ivory paper. You erased me from your story, but you forgot I still held the ending. Consider this chapter closed. Derek read it twice. Then he folded it, tucked it into the drawer where Lenore's ring still sat, the one he'd never dared to pawn. Meanwhile, Miranda met with Francis Adler one last time. They finalized Lenore's final donations, closed the estate account, and transferred the executor role to a neutral party. Miranda refused any payment. She took nothing for herself. This was never about money, she said. Francis nodded. You could have destroyed him more publicly. I didn't need the world to see, Miranda said softly. I just needed him to know. Later that month, Miranda stood in the garden of a small cottage she'd quietly purchased 2 towns away. Lavender bloomed along the fence. A dog adopted from a rescue slept beneath the porch swing. She didn't celebrate, she didn't gloat, she lived. Because in the end, some women get their justice not by raising their voices, but by walking away with the last word. People often asked Miranda if she ever regretted not exposing Derek publicly. She never answered. Not because she didn't have words, but because the question itself missed the point. She wasn't interested in punishment. She wasn't looking for spectacle. She didn't need cameras' applause or viral justice. She had seen what loud power looked like. Derek had wielded it for years in boardrooms, dinner parties, in the quiet ways he dismissed her with a smile. That kind of power always cracked. Miranda had chosen something slower. She had chosen precision. In the months following the court's final ruling, she left the city behind. Bought a modest stone cottage near the coast with savings Derek had forgotten she had money. She'd carefully tucked away from a side business she ran quietly under her maiden name for years. The sea air helped her sleep. So did the silence. No media, no scandal, no whispers, just lavender in the garden, a rescue dog named Len, and peace the kind that doesn't arrive until the storm has passed. She kept very little from her old life. No photos of Derek, no artifacts of their marriage. Just one file locked in a fireproof cabinet containing Lenore's handwritten note, the original will, and the closing statement from the probate judge. Some days she read it again, not for satisfaction, but to remind herself of what she'd survived. She never responded to the few messages Derek sent later, unsigned emails, with no subject line always written late at night. Sometimes it was just a single word. Why other times we could have fixed it. Miranda never replied. Some things aren't broken, they're finished. One afternoon, while folding linens, she heard the wind slam the porch door and instinctively reached to shut it, a small, simple motion. But it reminded her of something Lenore once said over tea. The truth never kicks the door open. It waits until you're ready to answer it. And Miranda had. The truth was Derek had underestimated her. So had everyone else. They saw a quiet woman, but quiet doesn't mean weak. It means watchful. It means deliberate. And sometimes it means you're the last one standing because you were the only one patient enough to see how the game would end. She lit a candle that night. Not for Lenore, not for Derek, but for herself, because healing isn't loud either. It's just real. And finally, hers.